6:32 on October 18th. We'll call the meeting to order. Motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
To adopt the agenda as is.
Sorry, yes, I guess discussion.
Right, or do you want to pull anything from?
Yeah, I'd like to pull, let's see, what is it, 4.3, the holiday parking promotional plan.
Because we just have the agenda, we don't have a consent piece, they're just informative. So, oh no.
There is a consent.
The
Consent.
Consent, okay, there's one on the consent, okay. Let's wait, so you approve the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that, you were right, okay. Vote to approve the agenda. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any abstentions? Nay? Okay. Agenda is approved. And now we have public forum, 3 minutes per person.
Yeah.
Yes, you may.
My name is Mark Stevenson. It's ironic that I'm here today to talk about a guest parking pass on the South Willard Street neighborhood. I live on a dead-end drive off of South Willard Street. I moved there 30 years ago. And during that time, Champlain has kind of grown from a 2-year school to a big business, and their footprint grew throughout the neighborhood. And before resident parking passes were implemented, they sort of controlled the streets. The residents of Tower Terrace, of which I'm one, took Champlain to an environmental court. And during that time period, they finally developed a transportation plan which included the city's resident parking. Tower Terrace is a private drive. The top half is owned by Champlain College. The next piece, I have a right-of-way across all of that. The next piece is 7 Tower Terrace. The next piece that I drive across, that I have a right-of-way across, is 5 Tower Terrace. There are 2 spots at the bottom of Tower Terrace, of which I barely fit on my own property. There are 2 spots. I own an 1890s carriage barn. It needs a lot of tender love and care. If I have a guest, or if I have somebody come to work on my house, I have to move my car. The closest space that I'm told that I can park legally is the parking lot downtown. I requested a guest parking pass. I'm now retired as of the past year, so I'm home during the day. My wife and I are both home. We have 2 cars. Through some fluke, I guess, I've been told that I'm not eligible for a guest parking pass. And I'm here today to beg for mercy from the court of public opinion, commissioners, to see what next steps I can take to right this wrong.
Thank you. So we can't engage with you, but we can take your comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Stevenson.
I will follow up with staff and have myself or a staff member follow up with Mark and let him know about the process and whether I can see a path forward to making that happen. And then if you don't find that acceptable, you're welcome to come back to the commission next month or take other action.
I'm retired. I've got lots of time.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Take care. Thank you.
Any other members of the public for comments?
We do have someone online.
Someone online?
Here. Sharon Busher.
Hi, good evening. I'm here to speak about 2 things. One
has to do with what I spoke about at the last meeting, which had to do with the way my property was left after the sidewalk work that was done on East Avenue. I'll do that first. And the second has to do with the holiday parking plan. I'm happy to report that Maddie engineer from DPW and Ireland actually came to my property today and they evaluated it before today, but actually started to rectify how it was left. And so there was agreement that this was unacceptable. And so I'm optimistic that at least the work around the greenbelt and my yard, which was my private yard, will be restored to the way it was. And that's good for the tree. And I'm happy as the property owner because it's good for my house sits very close to the road, but it's very good for the small front yard that I did have before and was ruined. And now it will be repaired and I'll have it again. We're talking a very small front yard. So, but I'm very appreciative. So that's good. The walkway, which is slanted and sloped, is still under discussion. But I wanted to inform the commission that the department has been responsive because when I complain, I like to keep you informed and let you know about how things have progressed. I think that's my responsibility to keep you informed. So that's number one. So thank you very much. Number two is what was on consent. I thought I heard someone removed it, but maybe not. The holiday parking plan, which I always support. You know, it's 2 hours of free parking. My question is, I think our downtown is more fragile this year than last year, than even the year before. And I'm really worried that this is inadequate. I don't know what Kelly Devine had to say about this or the other businesses. I don't think it's enough. And I really think that we should be offering free parking every day until, I know Sundays is free, but every day, at least like from the 15th of December to January 1st or something like that, to encourage people to come downtown. People don't want to come downtown because of safety concerns. Businesses, there's still really good businesses downtown. I myself don't go downtown as often as I used to. And I'm concerned about my own safety, but I also, the cost. I mean, the cost of having to park is a factor. It's real. So I'm hoping that people will talk about it. I think we want to invest in everything. We've got a drug crisis, we've got a housing crisis, but we have a downtown business crisis, which is being, I think, ignored. And I'm not putting it on DPW to solve, but I'm hoping that you will find some revenue or go to the mayor and the Board of Finance to ask for some increase in the budget to make this happen. Thank you so much.
We have someone on the line by D. Conger.
Can you hear me? Dave Conger.
Yes.
I'm actually a resident of Spruce Court in Burlington. Been a resident there since 2010. My wife has been there from before that. Back in 2013, our neighborhood basically came before the DPW to request the parking to be on one side of the street because at the time it was on both sides of the street and our street was too narrow for fire truck passage. As we went through that process, we basically got all our neighbors on board with that process. And as part of it, and unfortunately, I don't remember the gentleman who was representing DPW at the time, one of the changes that we made as part of that was to allow parking across the top of the street for parking on both sides, but south of that one portion to be just one side of the street. When that occurred, we got approval from the DPW. Signs were implemented, and when the signs were put in, a sign with no parking with an arrow for that last parking stall was installed. This last summer, we started getting tickets for that last spot, not understanding why that was occurring. We did reach back out to the DPW as well as parking enforcement to determine, what was the reason. Philip Peterson helped us to look into some of the research, and this was back in October 2013. The DPW commission did make a new parking ordinance to have no parking on in this case, the west side of the street, but it did not incorporate the fact that there was supposed to be an additional parking space at the top that was allowed. So when we did speak with this with Philip, via email with my wife, Amy, he recommended that we come before the commission to discuss this because, from our standpoint, we this was a neighborhood driven exercise that was approved. And it seems like as we went through the commission package, that last note was missing because the sign was installed, to show that intent, but the packet basically did not, say that there was going to be parking at the end of the street. That location is past all the driveways. It's a dead end. Fire trucks can access all buildings on the location. So, coming before the commission to, I guess, request that be updated, or we can certainly assist to, go further with the DPW, as residents. And even though I don't have all the emails in front of me, I certainly can. The neighborhood, by the way, most residents here have lived here more than 20 years. We have 2 houses that have apartment buildings. Essentially unanimous agreement that we would be able to get support for correcting this.
Your comments.
Yeah, staff will be following up with you, Dave, and this addition or change, if it wasn't enacted in 2013, would need to come back to the commission for action now and at a subsequent meeting.
And that's all we have for public comment.
Okay, we'll close public comments then. Next item is the consent agenda.
Motion to accept the consent agenda with 4.3 pulled.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, second from Commissioner Fox. To approve the consent agenda, but pulling 4.3.
And I have one other comment just related to the minutes. It's more just a spelling.
Okay.
Just
yeah.
just for my last name
Yep,
was the spelling.
I saw that.
Okay, we will correct it for finalized.
Damiani, not
Yeah.
Damianti,
Diamante.
Diamante. You are a gem.
Thanks.
Okay, vote to approve the amended consent agenda. All in favor?
Can I,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I ask a clarifying question about the Clark Street item? I don't want to take it off or anything. Just in the ordinance language itself, item 23, it says on the west side of Clark Street, beginning at the driveway of 48 Clark Street. Is that the right number, or should it be 36?
It's the right number because
Okay.
of the driveway itself.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the driveway is what's important. The house number is where it would be located.
But it's the-
driveway is further ahead.
Got it.
But it should be on the east side,
Oh, okay.
and not the west side. So
Yeah.
maybe you just caught it. We will hire you.
She gets
Okay.
paid in candy.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks for that clarification and amendment to the side. Okay. All in favor of approving the consent agenda with the amendment to poll 4.3? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against it? No? Okay. All right, great. So let's start with 4.3. Commissioner Damiani, would you like to start?
Sure.
Vice Chair.
Director Spencer, I was wondering if you could speak to the rationale for the utilizing the Downtown Improvement District funding towards these promotional parking events. My understanding is both the holiday one as well as some of the other previous ones in years past have utilized that funding source. Yeah, go from there.
Great, I appreciate your email in advance and the question. It's a good question. The Downtown Improvement District has a special assessment, and in charter, the Church Street Marketplace sets the rate, the commission, and it is for a parking program that the charter says shall include 2-hour free in the downtown, in municipal garages. So the program has to at least provide 2-hour free parking in at least one municipal parking garage. And it says a parking program that includes. So there could be additional parking promotions and efforts, as you saw in the packet, that we use the DID funds to also support the downtown employee free parking and some summertime promotions as well. That is eligible under the charter. There are also funds in the traffic fund that are paid by meters that are a bit more flexible, that aren't focused around a parking program. So those funds, as long as they control or regulate traffic, can be used more flexibly. In the past, we have used, say, meter revenue to help support things like not Main Street, Great Streets, St. Paul Street, Great Streets project. Usually the DID, which is paid for by business owners, is something business owners want to see a direct connection to. So if they pay this additional assessment, what are they getting in return? And usually these kind of promotional parking programs downtown are things that the business owners feel there's a direct connection to their investment in those programs.
Thank you. I guess I personally don't see that those funds should be used to give away free parking to either residents or visitors. I think that money should be used towards other transportation modes. But I think if it does need to be used towards parking per the Church Street Marketplace charter, is that correct?
Per the city charter.
The city charter.
And I can get you the exact language.
fine,
I
yeah.
don't have it on the top of my head.
I guess if it needs to be used for that, I think I would like to see it used a little bit more directly than just Friday and Saturday. I think my understanding from the Great Streets, Main Streets project, we got a lot of data about the utilization of parking downtown. My understanding is the downtown garage is heavily underutilized, still very close, within close proximity to the downtown district. So I'd like to see the program maybe targeted towards that for a longer period of time parking than on-street and off-street parking. I think regardless of whether on-street parking is free, people are still going to circulate around the city. And if we can get folks to utilize the downtown garage, even if it's free for a longer period of time than 2 hours, I think that's a win for the department and for the garage and for the businesses.
Okay, great. Happy to follow up with you, Vice Chair Demiani.
So I guess
Commissioner Hogan, do you have any comments on?
Nothing there.
Commissioner Barr?
I was just gonna say, I guess, point of order, are we gonna vote on this? Because it wasn't the consent agenda to pass, so the action is to vote, yes, or is it information?
It's information. We have to notice you. We put it in the
Okay.
consent just as approve the slate, but since it's been pulled out, the charter, the city ordinance just requires us to notify you, so no action is needed.
Right.
Commissioner Fox?
I'll just echo the vice chair's comments about wanting to push people towards the garages as much as we can do to prop them up as a really, I don't know, easy way to park downtown. We should be doing that. So, yeah,
Okay.
that's all.
And my 2 cents. Surprise, surprise. I would love to see maybe increased role of ambassadors to make people who park in the car parks, the garages, feel safer, so that we can highlight, parking there, the ease of parking there, and, an extra bit of security with our ambassador program.
Okay.
That's all. So there's no vote on that. This was just informational. We will close that item. Any other comments? What you to say? Okay. All right, and now on to item number 5, the wastewater update.
I'm gonna tag team a little bit with my engineering manager, Martin. Just gonna get this up. Everything's shared.
Yep.
Hold on. Usually I have 2 screens, so stand by. Okay. There we go. Love it when technology works. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Moyer. I'm the Division Director for Water Resources. I'm a little bit under the weather, so hopefully I will not cough through most of this presentation, or at least through my portion of the presentation. We wanted to provide you a couple of updates. You all were inquiring about how things were going with evaluating your tertiary treatment pilot results, and we thought, why only talk about one wastewater topic when we could talk about many wastewater topics? I mean, on a Wednesday night. So we thought we would spend a little bit of time making sure everybody has all their questions answered about what happened with the North Plant sewer siphon break and where we're at with that repair. And then I was gonna talk a little bit about the results of the tertiary pilot, let you know how that came out. Can't remember, some of you, I know we invited all of you, some of you were able to come to that awesome, explosion of science nerdery, which really excited me. And then I'm gonna hand it over to Martin, who's gonna start to give you some more information about really where we're going with our wastewater treatment facility renewal and now really largely an upgrade project. And talk about some, the difficult things, the numbers, how much we need to do, and get you engaged with starting to wrestle with the things that we're wrestling with. So North Plant sewer siphon break, I don't know if anybody saw, this presentation came from my presentation to the NPA. Really cool old photo that we found, which was how they laid the river sewer crossing in the late 1950s. We believe basically laying the pipe on top of the ice and then exploding the ice, and that's how it was laid on the bottom of the river. We have 2 sewer crossings.
Theory.
If people didn't know, and this is a thing that happens. We're not the only ones in the world. When faced with the choice of pumping, which creates lots of energy costs, and gravity, back in the old days, without thinking about other things like the river moving and whatnot, the decision was to go ahead and use gravity. And so part of the North Plant sewer shed drains to this location, and then it crosses underneath the river, or crosses the river, and then crosses over land, and then crosses again over the river. This area with the blue arrow actually did break back in, I think 2006, and it wasn't related to spring flows or storm flows. We believe at that time that it was related to some work that Colchester did on their side with armoring their river banks. It changed some of the river dynamics, caused some scouring, and then that pipe broke. The response to that at the time was to go ahead and directionally drill it. So instead of the pipe being on the bottom of the river, we actually went underneath the river. I believe it's about 20 feet below the river. And at the time that we did that, we did look at that lower sewer crossing. It was determined to be less risky or less susceptible to this type of break. But as we all know, fast forwarding to the post intense rain floods, it did in fact break. this is the approximate area of the new north end that drains to that point. So it's about half of the flow that usually goes to the north wastewater treatment plant. You know, we weren't celebrating, but we were thinking, whoo, wow, we escaped a big one when the rains hit in central Vermont and caused all that devastation, and somehow we didn't see any impacts here. Unfortunately, when the Winooski floodwaters hit, when Winooski River floodwaters hit in Burlington, it was that next morning, July 12th, when I got a call from the operator saying, we got a problem, there's no flow getting to main plant. We've, you know, popped the manhole and there's no flow coming in. Fortunately or unfortunately, the wastewater operator who was there during the previous break, and so he immediately knew or thought it's the siphon, or it's the, you know, it's the other siphon crossing. So we quickly mobilized. By 8:45 that morning, we were able to redirect the flows. So there's one manhole, the water from North Ave's coming in, and then the water from the siphon is coming in, and then it goes into the plant. Because the siphon had broken, the water even from North Ave was going and leaking out that same break, so we were losing all of the flow from the entire north end, new north end. Because our crews were able to react quickly, they were able to block off the sewer siphon part and at least get the flows coming from North Ave into the plant so we could treat those. And then we switched our attention to focusing on, really in the early days, public notification, letting people know as quickly as possible that this had happened, and posting of all lake access areas, including areas that aren't really public beaches, but we knew people sometimes like to frequent them along the North Shore. And so we were managing that and then quickly shifting our efforts to a couple of different strategies. The first one was basically 24/7 pumping and hauling, getting trucks there and sucking off as much sewage as possible to keep the entire volume from going into the lake. We weren't able to mitigate all of the stuff that was spilling in, but we were able to knock it down quickly. And then by, I guess, two nights later, thanks to what I call some amazing Iron Chef engineering and our engineer, largely Ashley Walenti, with the help of Martin and Kate, basically came up with an entire temporary force main and pump station design within 2 days. And then we were able to contact a contractor and start getting her built. So by July 17th, and I'm just celebrating this because, like, this is, no matter what happens with the rest of my career, seeing my team work this quickly to prevent additional environmental destruction from happening was like high five. I think I told you guys I might be prone to high-fiving and a lot of hugging in that time period, and I certainly was. So by July 17th, we were starting to build this 5,000-foot long force main across the landscape, and by July 25th, ECI was able to put that temporary force main into operations, which was, again, just pretty darn cool. I don't know if anybody here, I don't think anybody's in the New North End. If you drive by the pipe, I mean, it's there. It makes interesting noises as the pump kicks on and off. But really a pretty cool project, response to a terrible thing. So by July 28th, we were able to remove the lake access alerts after we did some E. coli testing to show compliance with recreational standards. Another thing I didn't mention when we were doing that public notification, we weren't just doing it for Burlington, we were also in communication with our partners over in Colchester, because they're very near the mouth of the Winooski. We wanted to make sure Chapin did a great job of keeping them in the loop. When we built the pump station, we acknowledged this is a temporary situation. It's not perfect, and it's not as robust as a permanent pump station like we have in other parts of the city. We want to acknowledge there have been a variety of issues. It's worked very well, but during large storm events, and then occasionally due to a few mechanical issues, such as a day when the I can't remember if it was the discharge. I think it was the discharge hose cracked and spewed things into the air. In every case, because of the alarming, we were able to get on it, act quickly, but we have had a couple of additional releases over the course of this this event. But overall, I mean, if we didn't have this in place, we would have been dumping, I think, on the order of 350,000 gallons of sewage in the river every single day without the quick, action of the team and the contractor that we had. All along, once we put this in place, we designed it so that if we had to go through the winter time, we could, but none of us 1 to 2. Largely because of the amount of effort it takes to kind of keep it, babysit it and make sure all the things that could go wrong with it don't go wrong. So we quickly were shifting to how could we get something in place for this winter, and then also the long term. A couple of other things we did, in the early days, we had done some dye testing, which helped show the location of the break. You can see the green dye, so that we literally put this very fluorescent dye into the pipe and then used drones to make sure that we could see it. We also dye tested from the other side, to make sure that that first crossing was okay, and also to give us an idea of, is this a small localized break or did we lose the whole pipe? Because if we had lost the whole pipe, that would have been a whole different scenario of emergency repair. But fortunately, the times that we dye tested it, came up in the exact same location, pretty darn close to the shore. It took us a long while because of all of the summer rains and the high turbidity. The Winooski was running chocolate brown for a really long time. And we finally were able to get divers in. We had them at the ready, I think almost even 2 weeks after the event happened, but they just couldn't get in and see anything. And even when they got in August, got into the water on August 17th, they were largely going by feel. They couldn't see a ton, but based on what they felt and recounted, I think this is Steve Roy's drawing, we were able to kind of sketch out what we thought we were up against, which was largely just this one separation, but with some scouring that was leaving that pipe not supported along the riverbank. So,
Excuse me, can you just explain scouring, please?
scouring is, so water has energy, and it has the ability to, move sediments. So while this pipe usually would be supported by dirt or river bottom sediments or rocks, it was washed away as by the river.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. So with the focus on what we knew was the problem, again, our engineering team quickly prepared a design build RFP and went out to get a contractor to fix this, or at least to put a really darn good Band-Aid on it, which will get us to the next phase. So as of last week, 10/9, and with the support of the Board of Finance and City Council, we were able to mobilize ECI. It's not a small price tag, but when you're doing things in water and with cranes and all of that, that's kind of what you expect. So that's underway right now. So far, we haven't heard of there being any problems. This is a recent picture with the divers having gone in and really visualized that gap. And I believe you may be able to speak to this. The scope of work includes not only, it's obviously fixing that gap, but then replacing a couple sticks of pipe.
They're gonna go about 70 feet beyond that to replace, and then do additional dye testing once it's done to confirm that it's sealed up.
To make sure that these joints, because the pipes are joined together, so it's not just one long section of pipe, so they're gonna do their due diligence when they're in there. Once this fix is in place, our plan is to decommission the pump station, those temporary pumps that are over on Plattsburgh Ave. However, our plan is to leave that 5,000-foot long force main in place, so that if something were to happen to our repair, and we believe this repair should be robust, but we would be able to quickly mobilize and not have to go through the whole process again and spend all of that money. But we would be looking to decommission that pipe as soon as we can, but that kind of factors into this longer term repair. So in parallel with releasing the RFP on the design build, our team was releasing requests for qualifications for design teams who could actually come in and help us evaluate various alternatives to not having a pipe on the bottom of the river. That might look something like directionally drilling or directionally drilling multiple pipes so we have resiliency under that section. But frankly, it may also involve looking at creating a permanent pump station with a permanent buried force main, which might be the safest overall, just get it out of the river entirely. We don't know. We're gonna have this design team help us crunch those numbers, figure that out, what does it look like, so on and so forth. And the cool part is that, well, two cool parts. It's not cool that Vermont reached this threshold, but because Vermont had so much damage, we went from the 75-25% cost share of FEMA now to the 90-10%, which I definitely gave a little yip in my car when I heard that. And then the state, because of our disaster planning efforts that we've done at the city, the state, my understanding, will cover half of that 10% local match. So we're still gonna be out some money, but it's a lot less than we would have been. And furthermore, conversations thus far with FEMA, it appears that they're on board with paying for this larger permanent fix. So not just the $800,000 that we're spending on the Band-Aid, but for actually helping us invest in putting this pipe back in it, or creating a different pipe system that is more resilient to climate change, that we're not gonna be back here having to put more Band-Aids on an old pipe, you know, in the years to come. So that's also really super positive.
It's in their system, so.
It's in their system, yeah, so hopefully we'll cross some point in which they can't backtrack, but it's just, you know, we were prepared to have to kind of fight about that, but the partner at FEMA has been really supportive of doing the right thing. If people want to stay abreast of everything that's going on, this is the website where we've been listing all of the updates. Does anybody have any questions on that before we go to the tertiary part?
Yeah, that's.
Or give high fives to Martin and his team, whichever.
Like, just a big collection of high five. Commissioner Hogan, do you have any questions, comments?
Yeah, I guess just one clarification. You spoke about the work that was done on like the upstream, or like that first river crossing that you mentioned went like 20 feet underground,
Yeah.
which wasn't squaring with my sense of gravity here. So is it under the river and then being pumped back up to like
It's siphon action.
across the land?
So even though it goes under, because the ultimate discharge point at the plant is lower than the original discharge point, even though you go up, water will move up
You
and
got it,
under and go up and under.
Okay.
Yeah,
I like it.
it's called a reverse siphon when you do this for whatever reason,
Mhm.
so, but yeah, that's the big positive, is that there's no pumps. But
Sweet.
obviously, there's a big environmental impact that we're facing now, so.
Because the challenge is, you know, things that are bothering us right now are these river crossings. I also don't like this, like, very long crossing across wetlands and forests. Like, I don't know exactly how we would deal with that. One of the other challenges is the directional drill for this crossing was a lot easier in that there's a easy access to the receiving pit, because you usually have to be on the other side and dig a hole so that the pipe can come up and you can do all the connections. There's not any easy access over here. So we're talking barges and permits, who knows what kind of permits to get into this type of area. So that will kind of all get played out in the long-term assessment. But, you know, moving the whole thing landside with a pump station, even though there will be long-term life cycle costs with the energy to pump, it will tackle both the crossing piece as well as this land crossing piece.
Gotcha. Thank you. And just out of curiosity, did you contract for the drone inspection of the dye testing?
We were prepared to contract with UVM Spatial Analysis Lab, but they ended up had been hired by the state already to do drone work. And then I think we also, if that wasn't gonna work, we were gonna use another consultant company who had a drone.
Mhm.
I think we ended up using Jarlis at UVM. Or did we use Vertier
I
once
think
and then?
we used Vertier once.
And then Jarlis the next, yeah.
Okay. And would that relationship cover the future testing? You mentioned like there's gonna be additional dye testing after this, sort of the short-term repairs goes in?
Yes, I think we would plan on getting it again, whoever it is. The short answer is yes. We would need to reach out and coordinate that, and that'll be probably a couple weeks time for now.
Mhm.
One other important thing is that we regularly dye test these pipes, I believe annually. And then we had actually just inspected, we'd actually had a diver creepy crawl along these pipes, I think in the spring, before this floods happened, and had gotten a report back that everything was good to go. So, and we were doing everything one could do with this type of situation and infrastructure being inherited you know, from decisions made in the 1960s.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Commissioner Barr?
No, I'm high fives to everybody for the quick reaction. I gotta say that's pretty monumental to help keep our lake and river as clean as it can be as we work towards it. So that's really all I have.
Great. Commissioner
Yeah.
Fox?
I similarly express kudos. That was a pretty riveting story going through that timeline. So, congratulations to you and your entire team, because that's just like a monumental feat of public service, frankly. So thank you. And the only other thing I'll say is I don't live in the New North End, but I run up there all the time, and I run past the pipe on Northview Drive. I mean, I feel like it's pretty inconspicuous. Like, it just sits there and does its job, and it's like, hey, that's a pretty cool, like, visible piece of water infrastructure that we have.
Maybe we should put all of our pipes up ground.
But yeah, so I've seen it. And I'm sorry, I think I just missed this. So that is gonna be decommissioned, but the pipe is still gonna stay.
We're gonna leave the pipe there over the winter until, you know, and we don't know exactly how long that other long-term fix is gonna be, but it's likely to take a while. I mean,
Right.
I think, fingers crossed, maybe we can get it done before the end of next year, but I think we have to figure out what the design is.
Okay.
And all the permitting. But for right now, we think, let's leave it there and see how this other fix holds.
Okay.
Rather than have to rebuild it. But the pumping system will go away, and we won't be using that pipe actively.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Vice Chair Damiani?
You answered my first question about timeline for the long-term fix, but for the, I guess also for the long-term fix, with the disaster relief funding that you mentioned, that's really gonna help fund, sounds like a large portion of this project. Does that impact the city's ability for sort of choosing what design the city thinks is best for us, just by having sort of other funding partners involved?
Yeah. Because we don't know for
Okay.
sure. We think hopefully they're gonna pick the one that is the most compelling, you know, case for climate resiliency. We're probably not in the position to fund it otherwise. But I think we'll be trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think those two options, like doing a double barrel, because that's the modern design standard, is having two pipes and a deep directional drill underneath the river. It's that option, or a pump station. We don't see another option at this point, and I think FEMA's aware that those are the two options that we're looking at.
And they haven't said no to
Either,
one.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you very much. You know I love geeking out on this water stuff. And I think, so, you know, I was certainly following this as a resident and aware of all the communications, and I think we always measure things like my work, this work, but I think this metric, what you mentioned, 350,000 gallons a day that didn't hit the river as a result of the work that your team did in a very short period of time is, I think, astounding. And I think we need to celebrate these, like, you know, I know the ship has already sailed, we're into October and so forth, but I'm just so impressed at that timeline that you indicated, and, you know, the drawing that the diver did, you know, did he just come?
That's Steve Roy listening to the diver
Oh.
and then translating it.
Okay,
into-
even more
and then
impressive.
I
making-
think that's pretty good for an underwater drama.
Yeah.
Right in the
So-
rain paper.
So, I mean, I think we're all here because we love infrastructure in some way or another, and it's like our kind of socks and underwear, where everything is fine until it's not, right? You don't think about your socks until your toe is poking out, and this
I
is
love
this one thing where you're, oh my God, the toe is really poking out of the hole. So, just really impressed with the whole team on this. And I guess, so in this temporary piece, I'm happy to hear that hopefully we'll kind of move through with this FEMA funding. And just thinking about the climate resiliency piece, and you have these two models, examples of what could work. Does FEMA incorporate local knowledge and situational expertise on that design, just to kind of expand on what Vice Chair Damiani asked about, is there a preference on the two systems? And I know there are sort of a lot of calculations that have to go into that. Or are you still kind of trying to figure out which one's gonna be better?
We're a little new to the process, but I mean, I certainly will be reviewing and working with the engineers to make their best case about the fact that one solution in my mind takes care of the whole enchilada, right?
Yeah, and I mean, usually there are non-cost environmental factors that go into an
Yes.
evaluation. So I think that'll be important here.
Right, so there, even though things may look equal on one side, you can try to make your case more on the other for a variety of reasons. I mean, I think, just for being honest, the next big challenge, perhaps not in this iteration, because it can't be addressed, but where North Plant is not an ideal location on the bend of a river, really kind of in like the cutoff chute if you were to look at the river on a bigger level, and in fact is the one piece of city infrastructure that does not have insurance because of its location. So, just sharing the risks that we uncover every day of how things were built, and trying to figure out how to do our best with some of the things we're going to be talking about. Certainly, the design for the next upgrade will be keeping that in mind to try to make it as resilient as possible given its location. But next generation, wherever you are, they're gonna have to probably figure out how to deal with the location in a bigger way.
Okay.
Sorry, we had a lot of rah-rah, but we gotta bring it back to reality.
Yeah, no.
Has insurance, no
Thank you.
flood insurance.
No flood
Right.
insurance, sorry.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Thank you.
Sorry.
For the record, it has insurance.
Yeah.
Great, no, thank you for those responses. All right, and now onto the tertiary treatment pilot.
Yes, tertiary treatment. So, why, given all the things we have to do, would we even be looking at like more new things at the wastewater treatment plant? And the reason really is, the health of our lake. There's a lot of things that factor into cyanobacteria blooms. Some of them we can control and some of them we can't. Well, not imminently control. And one of the things we can't really control right now is the calm, warm water conditions that we saw this summer, which really kind of kicked up cyanobacteria much earlier. The piece that humans can control more easily, more quickly, is how much nutrients we're putting into the lake. And so because of that, the state in 2016 had passed a total maximum daily load, which looked at all the different ways in which humans needed to limit the discharge of phosphorus, which is one of the primary nutrients in the lake that drives cyanobacteria from the landscape. And for those of you who have attended previous presentations, we looked at all of the different ways in which we thought Burlington could manage its phosphorus obligation. Burlington's phosphorus contribution comes primarily from two places, from the wastewater treatment plants and from stormwater. And under the integrated planning effort, we looked at all the things we had to do for combined sewer overflow, for regular stormwater management, and then we started playing with a couple of different variables to see what are the different ways in which Burlington could manage this. One of the options over there on the third sort of this scenario was, could we achieve our phosphorus obligations, which I believe are, I can't remember if it's the total amount of pounds, I think it's 1,100 that we need to find. Could we achieve all of our phosphorus obligations purely through stormwater management? Grew up as a stormwater geek, have come to grow and love wastewater, but I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could just do all stormwater and tackle this problem? Unfortunately, even though we could probably eke out enough stormwater improvements to meet our target, when we looked at it compared to some other options, such as installing tertiary treatment, so a treatment practice at main plant, our largest wastewater treatment plant, when we looked at all the cost differences and the sort of reality of whether or not we'd be able to really make people make the right choices, particularly on the stormwater side, our attention kept getting drawn to the fact that pursuing tertiary treatment at main plant was going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. It was going to not only meet the average the average phosphorus reduction we needed, but it was also gonna give us a buffer to deal with the fact that our wastewater treatment plant's phosphorus discharge fluctuates based on weather. Because we have a lot of wet weather or combined sewer that goes there, it's not a static number. It goes up and down depending on the types of rainstorms. And so, from that, sorry, this was my target slide. So this is the amount, we needed about, I think, 1,100 pounds of phosphorus reduction. And when we do the bits that we have to do in the stormwater and other sectors, the vast majority, very easily we can get it, I say very easily, most easily we can get it by implementing tertiary treatment, a third level of treatment at main plant. So when wastewater treatment plants are looking at new technologies, it's customary to do a pilot. You don't design it, on your desk and then hope that it's gonna work. You actually need to subject the different technologies that you're interested to the actual conditions. And so the goal of the tertiary pilot was to evaluate the ability of selected technologies to meet 0.1 milligrams of phosphorus. The average performance of main plant, usually she's able to get the phosphorus level down to about 0.28 milligrams per liter. We've had it evaluated. Engineers say that the plant is performing exceedingly well, largely due to the creative ingenuities of our plant operators who are dialed in and constantly watching how things are varying. But we can't get it any lower than that, even with additional chemical optimization. It's basically doing as well as it can. So in order to get down to this 0.1, which was modeled in the integrated plan, we need additional technologies. And so we needed to evaluate this under a variety of conditions, what we call steady state, which is just sort of like everything's normal, it's a typical day, nothing's crazy. Hydraulic stress, which is when the plant receives a lot of excess flow from that wet weather, so from a storm event. Our plant flows ramp up from like 3.5, 4 MGD up to as much as 13 MGD very quickly, and that can present a stress for any type of treatment technology. And then the other type of stress test is a solid stress test. So when or if the process, particularly the biological process, is not happy or functioning well, which happens on occasion, the system can release more solids than is typical, and we wanted to make sure that this tertiary treatment would be able to handle that as well. A secondary goal, kind of like a bonus goal, would be to evaluate the ability of those technologies to reduce phosphorus during wet weather events. We don't believe we're required to do that, but because we're still in conversations with the state about exactly what our permit's gonna look like, we wanted to make sure we had something in our back pocket, so if things went a certain direction, we might be able to at least know what we could do to further reduce the phosphorus that goes out into the lake during storm events. They released a request for proposals, and they selected 3 different technologies or vendors, which all have 3 very different technologies. The ActiFlow, which I added a W, it does not have a W, ActiFlow ballasted flocculation, which if I recall, it sort of gets the phosphorus particles to stick to sand particles, which makes them heavier, which means more of them drop out versus sometimes you can keep getting some floaters. Nexum was a really cool technology where they actually sort of supercharge the sand on the outside to be even stickier, and then when the water passes through it, it's able to grab on to more phosphorus and kind of hold it within the filter, and then goes through a backwash cycle to regenerate that sand and all those not antigen sites, but it's similar process, action sites. And then aqua aerobic system is kind of the simplest, in which it's really like a cloth media filtration. It was the shag carpet that you may remember, super soft, blue, and it really just works with the physical action of, well, adding chemicals to create larger particles that then get filtered out, much like through a coffee filter. Is that ringing a bell for those of you who go there? Mm-hmm. These are all the fancy, schematics. This is the ActiFlow system, the Nexum Blue Pro, and then the Aqua Aerobics cloth media filter sock. And at the end of the day, all 3 technologies, they met the goal of the 0.1. So there was no one technology that was a super dud. But when we looked at Aqua Aerobics, it performed the best overall during the steady state. So Aqua Aerobics is this green line. This red line is the goal. And you can see some of the other, and then the purplish blue is the influent TP, so that's what's the phosphorus that's coming in before it goes through tertiary treatment. And you can see that the orange, Nexum, and the regular blue, Veolia, you know, kind of hugged and were able on average to stick around that 0.1 during steady state, but except for this first day when they were kind of dialing things in, the cloth media filters really were able to just perform super well throughout that entire period. It was also, it didn't do as well as, I can't remember if it was the active flow, it didn't do as well during the storm event, but it still did well. It still was able to knock down the phosphorus that we usually would see going out into the lake during a storm event down lower, I think to 0.38 or something like that. This is sort of their performance over all of the different states. So you have steady state, the hydraulic stress, and then back to steady state with that one peak being the vortex blend. And you can see again, this isn't a comparison, this is just the aqua aerobics, but you can see that aqua aerobics again was able to stay below that 0.1 target the entire time with the exception of that one storm event. But even the storm event, right, it's knocking it down quite substantially, so it is able to do good things during a storm event. Any questions about all the graphs? I love graphs.
What was that hydraulic stress period? Was that
It's
heavy
a-
rain during those few days?
So the hydraulic stress period is a artificial hydraulic stress situation that they create. They're only pumping a certain amount, if I recall, they're only pumping a certain amount to the tertiary treatment, and so they sort of artificially pumped more than would usually go there under normal conditions. So that's an artificially generated. The vortex one was them actually grabbing flow from the vortex and blending it and then putting it through the system so that it was seeing that potentially dirtier water. Because the vortex, it's the big sort of swirl separator, it's the water that's not going through the full primary biological and secondary process. So during certain portions of the storm, it can have more phosphorus than treated wastewater would. Certainly not more phosphorus than regular untreated wastewater.
Gotcha, thanks. So they're both artificial stresses.
The vortex wasn't artificial in that there was a storm event going on and that we intentionally grabbed some of that flow, whereas during the rest of the time period, that storm flow from the vortex wasn't going through, only the stuff that came through the plant.
Thanks.
So there are some cost proposals that are listed in the report. Happily, aqua aerobics was the most consistent performer, and it is also believed to be the most cost-effective option, which is a win-win because sometimes it doesn't work out that way, both from a capital cost as well as a life cycle cost perspective. So when we look at energy and chemicals that way, as well as just pure capital cost, it's still the most cost-effective approach. The cost proposals in the report are preliminary, and they don't, Martin, you can maybe chime in, they don't include the cost of potential pumping that'll be necessary. So the next step in designing is figuring out where we can fit this thing, and based on where we're fitting it, how much pumping is gonna have to happen to get it to the new system. And so those pumping costs will increase the overall capital cost of being able to do this.
Where we have the effluent from our secondary clarifiers, and then that goes usually out right to the disinfection. So we have a certain elevation that we have to play with, and it's very likely that that won't work, and we'll need a pump to get it through the tertiary right after that step.
So, always a little more complicated than you'd like. Right now, we're, placeholding a conservative estimate of about 20 million in order to be able to implement this technology within the confines of the other things that we need to do at the wastewater plant, which we are getting to soon. Any other questions about tertiary treatment? I would be remiss, I've frequently committed, Burlington is gonna do its part, we're gonna meet our phosphorus obligation through the TMDL. The challenge is the lake is a mixed system, and so just continuously remind people to support statewide efforts for phosphorus reduction, because we can do everything that we're gonna do, and there's still gonna be phosphorus coming down the Winooski River, and so sadly, we may very likely continue to see cyanobacteria blooms. And so, you know, we're having conversations with BP, with Burlington Parks and Recreation, Waterfront, about resiliency measures, about how do we provide places for people to cool off even if they can't access the lake. You know, one of the challenges with the flood, I think I had heard a snippet that the entirety of what came down the Winooski River in 2022 as far as phosphorus came down the Winooski in that one flood event. So climate change is a thing that we collectively as a state and a region have to really try to figure out how we're gonna change things. Again, sorry to have sadness, but so much nerdery and happiness, but.
Okay, well, let's see if we have any questions so we can end on a high note now. Commissioner Fox, any questions on the presentation?
Yeah, I had one. I apologize. It was a lot to get through, but I'm on, let's see what page of the packet that I'm on.
Oh, the report itself? Okay.
Yeah, on page 3, well, okay, maybe I can just summarize it, but it seems like the aqua aerobic system is in place, like a version of it in South Burlington, is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay, yeah, I noticed like Airport Parkway, whatever, so I was just curious if we have like reached out to the folks there to see what their experience has been with that system,
Yes.
see if we can learn from them.
Yeah. Operators are real big, like wastewater operators, they're not gonna listen to engineers, they wanna talk to other operators, and so whether it's a pump or this or that, they're always looking for references and field trips to go kick the tires and really talk to people, you know, somebody, not the salesperson, but the person who's dealing with it every day, and like, okay, how much is it a pain in the butt to shut this thing down so, yeah, 100% references all the way.
Okay, cool, yeah, I was just curious since it seemed like it was close by, like probably a good opportunity to lean on our neighbors for some info.
Maybe there's one in Hawaii too, I think we can go to. Bring the whole DPW commission, right?
Maybe sometime in February?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Not enough, no.
And then another question I had, I don't know if this is too nitty gritty perhaps, but I was curious about in sort of like the ongoing maintenance part, they estimate that like miscellaneous parts replacement is going to be like only 20 hours a year of annual maintenance in like miscellaneous parts, and I just feel like maybe this is a question out of a lack of understanding, but it just seems like that number is really low, like 20 hours of miscellaneous parts replacement a year.
You can write
like,
that down and take a look at that.
Okay, I was just curious, like it seemed potentially low to me. I don't.
Maybe that's on like the year when like no major maintenance is, because
Maybe like on average.
Yeah.
Okay, that
So
makes sense.
we can look into it.
No, I was just sort of
Yeah, no, I think my
yeah.
understanding with the aqua aerobics thus far is that the major sort of ongoing thing is like you do have to occasionally replace the filter socks.
Okay.
And then, but the systems are redundant, so you usually have like, you have one system and then you have an entire backup system, so if you have to take this one down, you can use the other one. And some of our thinking is, depending on the pumping costs, because we always have to have those two systems anyway for dry weather, for normal weather compliance, there's the possibility to be able to use that backup system, at least on occasion, for storm events, to process storm events, if done in the right way, right? Rather than it just sitting there as a backup, could it be used to get us a little extra phosphorus? I mean, if we can do better than we're supposed to for the lake, you know, then by all means, we want to try to figure out how to do it as long as we can remain compliant with our permit limits.
Those are all the questions I had. Thank you.
Those are good questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barr?
Sure. I think this is fantastic. You obviously know your stuff, and you guys are all working in the right direction for this. And I know that this is focused on Burlington and what we process before it goes in. I'm just curious, and we don't need to get in a lengthy discussion about it, but what about the other cities that border the lake? And do we get phosphorus and blooms from as far north as like St. Albans and Swanton and those places, or are they going to be looking at the same kind of things that we are?
They are, I mean, all wastewater treatment plants over a certain, I've lost track because we basically had to do everything. They did sort of break things down into small plants, medium plants, and large plants, and I can't remember if it's all large plants or medium and larger had to go from current levels down to 0.2. Some of those are able to just do it through optimization, but others are also going through upgrades. The majority of the influence on Burlington Harbor and the main lake is gonna be coming from stormwater, river erosion, and wastewater treatment plants all along the Winooski Basin. That's really our biggest influencer, so.
Right.
And I haven't done the analysis of sort of, because there's a lot of smaller plants along there that may not be subjected to technology changes. Every single plant, my understanding, every single plant across the state is having to go through phosphorus optimization planning, where they're supposed to get as much out of their plant as they possibly can.
Okay, good, because, I mean, as much as you're
And
doing.
agriculture, sorry, I missed
Yeah.
agriculture, but
And
across
that-
the board, everybody's having to do way more than they ever have.
Right, and the agricultural piece is the one that I was just thinking about, that there's a lot of farms that border the Winooski River, and a lot of stuff flows into it. And as much money and effort and great ideas that we're putting into it to process from Burlington, it's gonna reduce it, I know it is, but are we still just gonna keep getting affected by the stuff coming down?
I mean, the
Winooski?
agricultural regulations have also become much more stringent. It is harder because, you know, it's like non-point source, and you have to go farm by farm by farm by farm by farm. And that's why I just sort of the call to action when you hear people debating in the State House about funding for any water quality activities, whether it's wastewater or stormwater or ag. Like, we all need to be standing up and making sure that as much money as possible is going towards those. It's unfortunate that it has to battle against other things that are also important, like social services, but it is all very important.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to create any increased impacts on the farms, because they're struggling as it is, but
That is the challenge.
if they are an impact on it. Anyway,
Yep.
that's all I got.
Commissioner Morgan.
Thank you, and thanks for answering my questions earlier. Sorry for jumping in there. I appreciate the look at both the capital costs and the recurring costs. Of something that struck me when I was taking the tour of the different options that day. Some have like things running and humming the whole time, and some are more like filter based and stuff. No, thanks for the update, Aaron. Great work on it.
Of course. The next stage is to, to turn it into a preliminary design and figure out some of the intricacies that Martin was saying, and to be merging that effort with the larger wastewater treatment facility renewal and upgrade effort, right? Because we're moving this thing and it's like a giant slide puzzle. So trying to integrate all of that together and figure out exactly the timing of when we will be implementing tertiary, which needs to happen sooner rather than later because of the obligations under the TMDL. So we're hoping that it will be one of the big drivers in the conversation about seeking voter support as we move forward. So, were there any other questions? Sorry if
Vice Chair Daniel.
Is there a timeline that we need to get to the point one? Is it 0.10 or 0.20? I forget.
we need to achieve our phosphorus overall limits,
Yep.
yes. I believe by 2026.
Soon, yeah. And then I heard you just say sort of going to the voters to get funding. Is the city responsible for an entire local share? Is there state money involved in funding something like this, given I'm assuming this came from a state regulation?
Yeah, there is no explicit phosphorus reduction funding now. There used to be, and it has moved from where it was, I think, in the 1990s. There were some specific grants. We would be looking to fund this largely through the state revolving fund,
Okay.
for which we can sometimes get loan forgiveness. I don't have the details, but I know some of the projects we've already done, the disinfection and the disinfection and the SCADA project, we recently got notice. Sometimes you find out years after the thing was built that you got the grant money, which is what has happened recently. So you don't always know in advance, but participating in that state revolving fund program does give you access to a variety of loan forgiveness programs. I think as we get closer and have our final number of all the different things we're gonna do, we're gonna be beating the bushes even harder than, I know Chapin and I have put together multiple funding requests to the congressional delegation, you know, for something like this, and that will be continuing because it is important, and it will be very helpful to the ratepayers of Burlington to get some grant funding.
Excellent, thank you. And could you also speak to the, you know, if the target is this number that the state has set, and the city of Burlington is asked to have more and more development within the city, and sort of, does the modeling that is either in this report, or where does the modeling of, like, as more development is being pushed into Burlington, and that all that impervious surface and all that other stuff, how does that impact sort of what the city is looking at of building here, and do we need to scale up more? Are we looking at scaling up more for this type of system for the increased development?
So as part of the integrated planning project we did at that time, I think it was in 2019, looked at 20-year future flows. We've been updating or making sure, because there's been some shifts, as you all know, in growth tolerance recently at the state level and here in Burlington, and we've been constantly double, triple checking our growth projection numbers, both with the larger upgrade project, to make sure that we're building flexibility and capacity for that growth to happen. So that, and as we get into preliminary engineering, I think we'll be honing in on that more, because we'll be able to, I like the aqua aerobics because it's sort of like little IKEA, you know, IKEA modular, like you can buy it in sort of different sizes, right? So the same technology, if you need to ramp it up or add additional
It's easy to do,
cassettes,
okay.
you're able to do so. But it's very important when we start talking about the large pumps and other things that we're building as part of the upgrade, we do have to be thinking about that, because it's a lot harder if you have to replace all of the pumps to bigger pumps.
And
Yeah.
we touched, later on in the presentation, we do touch on that a little bit with the East plant. Bringing it to main plant kind of checks that box, and so we can get into that.
Yep.
Okay, excellent, thank you. I was just thinking as we look out this way with the
Yep.
South End Innovation District and all that development, so.
It's been interesting, because you know,
Good question.
nothing ever just stops. I would love it if things would stop for like 5 years and we could just catch up and then we could progress, but that is not
Yeah.
humanity, so, here we are.
Excellent.
So, and then did you have?
No, actually, you covered, I think you covered most of my questions. I guess maybe one final thing is when to anticipate this coming back before the commission?
We'll talk a little bit about potential schedules. I think, right now, we're trying to use the remainder of the bit of money that remains for 2018 to get as much work done as possible. Martin will be talking about that, what we're referring to as stage 0. Tertiary will be coming in stage 1, which we would hope to start construction in 2025. And so right now, we're currently looking at a bond vote of some size in November 2024. And so I suspect in late spring, summer, we're gonna be hitting it hard, trying to get everybody on the same page about why we're doing these things and why they're important as we head into taking necessary votes to get it on the ballot.
Okay.
Is that in line, Chapin?
Yes. We have a number of big investments. There's water investments that are needed as well, and so the question we're trying to figure out is when do we bring each, and do they go together or are they separate? But yes, this wastewater item, given we're still doing some of the preliminary engineering, the most likely time is November 2024.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay. So zooming way out to our 3 plants. Some of you were around in the 2018 challenges when, you know, look, our plants were built, they finished building them in 1994, so they are approaching 30 years old. Wastewater treatment plants usually are upgraded around, you know, your 2025 max, that's their usual typical lifespan. We saw some failures that started to happen in 2018. We had done a preliminary evaluation with a consultant in 2016 and had some decent estimates at the time of the things that we needed to focus on. And so when the disinfection system failed and the SCADA system failed in 2018, we did grab those numbers off the shelf, and those were largely what we used to develop our proposal that was for $30 million, of which about $20 million was for wastewater. I think we tried to express in, obtaining that voter approval that we didn't view this as the end-all be-all. This was sort of the get it started. And in fact, once we got the disinfection and the SCADA project kind of on our way towards construction of those failed systems, our engineering team with our consultants kind of turned their attention back to, okay, there's the remainder of the money, which was about $12 million, making sure that we had updated cost estimates, and then also making sure that the list of things that we thought we needed to work on were in fact the highest priority things. And I've shared this with you all before, but what we found when we started looking at it and looking at it from a risk perspective is that while we were doing some improvements after the 2021 upgrades and getting rid of some of the failed systems, as you looked out across time, even after we thought we could spend the $12 million, there were still a ton of systems that were in the C, D, and F category, and this is also an eye test, apparently. For those of you who can't see that, but those are letter grades A, B, C, D, and E, using a fairly rudimentary risk system. And overall, the number of systems and the replacement costs of the remaining high-risk systems we just found were, significantly higher, significantly greater than the remaining money that we had. And we also started to see, as we tried to move all the pieces, that anything less than a comprehensive, like a truly comprehensive equipment and process renewal was going to keep Burlington at risk of wastewater treatment failures and what I consider preventable beach closures. There's some beach closures that are a little harder to prevent because of climate change, but the ones that directly result from our failed infrastructure, I do view those as preventable. And I made my pitch to you all last time that, Burlingtonians, they deserve resilient treatment systems where risks of failures are minimized, right? So at its core, we need to make sure that the stuff that we got there right now works, because we're starting to have trouble with that. Separately, when we start to think about a more modern wastewater treatment system, we want to focus on actually improving and modernizing those wastewater treatment systems, not backsliding, but doing things like tertiary treatment, making it so that we can create even better water quality for what's going out the pipe. Making sure that our systems are as resilient as possible, even given their locations, against flooding and other natural disasters. We're looking at how we increase the capacity of Maine to accept a potential east plant consolidation, as well as other growth opportunities in the city. We have a number of safety issues, and we want to make sure that in this upgrade we're making those conditions a lot safer for our employees, particularly around ventilation. They're exposed to a lot of different types of gases and whatnot from sewer systems, and we want to take care of that. And then the last piece, which I think everybody will vote yes for, is we may not be able to get rid of all the odors, but through some of the work that we're trying to target on the primary systems, the initial sets of tanks, which has some of the stinkiest water in it, we're hopeful to reduce off-site odors at Maine Wastewater Treatment Plant, which we hope will be a benefit to bike path users. And this is what I alluded to before. I'm going to hand it over to Martin. Stage 0 is largely us drawing down the remaining money that we have. As we move on to stage 1, there's a specific focus there, and that's where tertiary treatment would be. Stage 2 has a different area of focus, and then stage 3 is further out. We want to be making sure that we have this big plan of how we're going to progress over the coming years. And with that, I will hand it to Martin.
Thanks, Megan. I'm gonna share the
I can go
screen.
ahead and I'll run the slide.
Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. So yeah, as Megan said, stage 0 is what we have bond money for now. That's the headworks upgrade, and I'll get into the scope as we move through the slides. Stage 1 is Maine wastewater treatment facility significant upgrades, which we don't have bond money for. And stage 2 is the conversion of East Plant into a pump station, as well as high priority items at the North Plant. Stage 1 and Stage 2 are in preliminary engineering phase, and Stage 3 includes important upgrades at North and Main. There would be no east in this scenario, and we aren't in any engineering phase at this point. So as we move into discussion of Stage 0, I just wanted to talk about schedule and cost a little bit for Stage 0. This is the headworks upgrade, which includes screening and grit primarily at all 3 wastewater plants. Design is underway, so from 2023 to 2024, we'll be in design. Construction planned to start in 2024 through 2026. The cost estimate is approximately $12.8 million, which is part of the 2018 bond.
And as Martin goes through, we are presenting our cost estimates. They are conservative. We're constantly refining them, and early in the preliminary stages, you often do see cost estimates with higher contingencies, but they are what they are.
Yep. Next slide.
Yep.
So, this is Stage 0 in final design. This includes, Megan is highlighting the bottom is the screenings building, and that's where the wastewater first enters. That's where we're gonna be replacing the dry weather influence screen. That's with a rake system and a wash press. It's basically a replacement of what's there with modern equipment. And as well as influent gates and the controls for those gates, pretty substantial pieces of equipment that just need to be replaced because they're constantly failing. I have some photos of those. We have some building improvements here that are necessary from a code perspective, as well as the new equipment that we're putting in. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, that's the grit building. So we'll be replacing the grit and grease removal system that's in there and updating components of that system. Again, it's largely a replacement in kind, but with modern equipment and meeting modern design standards. Because these systems are at the beginning of the plant process, so they really do experience the highest wear and tear.
Bricks, rocks, whatever anybody puts down the toilet or in the catch basin, so they get hit hard.
Yep. Probably go to the next slide. So same thing is happening and proposed it's in final design for Stage 0 work at North and East wastewater treatment facilities. The east plant is the aerial image on the left, and the highlight is around the grit and screening building. So the building itself, which is the green roof, that's where the current screen is that needs to be replaced. And on the exterior, right on the right-hand side there, is the grit and grease removal system. So as part of this, we'll also be modernizing the building so that it's more energy efficient and so that it has up-to-date HVAC ventilation.
And that system, I would say, even though we're gonna consolidate or turn East Plant into a pump station, that's something you would need to have there anyway, so it's not like we're spending money and then we're gonna undo it later on.
Right, so we picked basically items that were high priority and under all circumstances that we perceive need to happen. Like we're not wasting money on things that in 5 years we may not need anymore. We're gonna need these for a long time. And same applies for North Plant, so this is down at the end of North Ave. Basically, it's the same design, constructed at around the same time, so. Next slide, these are some photos that, thanks to operations staff, I collected. Some of them even from today, because I was like, oh, what's in the maintenance garage? And it happened to be one of the cylinders and shafts for a gate. So on the upper part, that's something that will be replaced. Multiple components of our gate systems are failing and are going to be replaced for Stage 0 work. in the screenings building. And then on the bottom there is, that's where the screen, that's the channel where the screens are. And it's actually supposed to have the shaft connected. It just happened to be snapped off after that specific failure.
And the thing is, if these don't work, right, stuff gets through and will just destroy the rest of the plant. So like, it's not really a, you know, thing that we can leave.
Yep, and then onto the middle here, this is in the screening building as well. I think it was December, it was late 2023, one of our mechanics, end of 2022, yeah, mechanics completely rebuilt our influence screen that we're gonna be replacing. But they had to use custom parts because the equipment is completely obsolete, like basically the manufacturer doesn't supply the stuff that we need. And so thanks to having such a great operations team, we were able to do that. But I just wanted to share that photo, and on the bottom is, again, it's just something that needs to be replaced in kind, basically, is the dumpster that's been welded with basically half the metal that's corroded away. And on the right, we have more corrosion to show on, this is in the grit building now. So part of our grit classifier system, this is removing the grit from the wastewater before it moves through the system. And these show more welding and corroded pipes. The upper right hand piping shows one pipe was actually replaced a few years ago with stainless steel because it was failing, so we need to do the other one. It's just things are falling apart in there. And the bottom photo is the grease arm on our grit collection system broken, so that's before they repaired it. So just, you know, our guys are always working and maintaining the facilities, and wanted to show, you know, it'll relieve a lot of headaches that are only gonna get worse if we don't fix this.
And also the person who primarily fixed all of these things is probably retiring in the next year. And just from a workforce standpoint, finding folks with some of the skills that we currently have has been hard as well. So that's also like a risk in the back of our head.
So stage one work, we're in preliminary engineering phase right now from 2023 to 2024. Design will start in 2024 through 2025, and then construction starting in 2025. And this is a big ticket cost item because it's not just replacing in kind. It includes replacing in kind, but it also includes significant improvements at the main wastewater plant, including tertiary and new tankage. So I'll move to the next slide and jump into.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're going too slow.
Yeah, no, so I know it's my age.
$4 sign.
$4
signs.
$4
signs.
Yes. Yeah, 121 million estimate was what's on the, for stage one. And it's a significant update to main plant. This is in preparation. We can't bring East Plant to main plant without upgrading here first. And upgrades here are also necessary for aging infrastructure. I can get more into the justification of the East Plant pump station when we get to that slide later, but I just wanted to set that up, that this upgrade is to accommodate the East Plant flows coming here. It includes some of the new items, are replacing aeration tanks and getting new blowers, and so that equipment would be in a new location. And tertiary treatment equipment would also be in a new location, as well as the new secondary clarifier. So the circle in the upper right is.
My little room thing is not responding. There
Yeah,
we
so
go.
that depicts the, you know, a to be determined location of the secondary clarifier, and then tankage also represented on the right-hand side by that rectangle. You can see that that's in Perkins Pier, which is a significant piece of this project.
And just to speak, like, the expansion is both for East Plant as well as Main Plant is starting to butt up against some of its capacity challenges, particularly like on the organic loading. I think from a hydraulic standpoint, it still has flow. So that alone was sort of had us on the cusp, and then the scenario of bringing East Plant definitely pushes us in the direction of needing these
Right, so,
expansions.
and bringing East Plant over, might as well talk about it now, because
Yeah.
it's such an important item, is we would be combining the permit flow from Main Plant with the permit flow from East. So not just the design, East Plant doesn't receive its full flow that it's permitted for, but we're not gonna bring it over here and kind of forego what we have permitted, because that's very valuable, and we need to keep that. So we'll bring it over to Main Plant, and what that adds is also a level of flexibility of where growth happens in the city. So we're kind of, by consolidating, we're then able to gain capacity at Main Plant to meet the growth projections, but it's a it's not like we're going to the state to say, oh, we need, to increase our permit. We're just going with an existing permit. So I think that's
I don't mean to be dense here. So basically, if you're saying like East Plant is like a capacity of, I'm just saying 5, and North Plant is a capacity of 5, by combining them, then you have a capacity, a state permit capacity of 10, without having to ask for more for North Plant. Is that my understanding?
For Main
For Main
Plant,
Plant,
correct.
sorry, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
so
okay.
it's closer to like 5 and 2, and like 1.8.
1.2, is it 1.2?
But whatever it is, you're adding the 2 of them,
Yes.
and that whole piece for Main Plant then is still under the same.
Right, and
Okay.
East Plant gets, I think, approximately half of its permit, so that means that we get that additional capacity at Main Plant, which then is projected to meet future growth for the next 20 years at Main Plant.
Okay,
Much bigger sewer shed.
thank you.
Yeah.
Also, and probably get into it or touch upon it again, but this enables us sort of to consolidate resources, and so when we look out long-term, it ends up saving ratepayers money to not have 3 separate plants. It's sort of weird to have a small town with 3 separate wastewater plants, and a lot of engineers, when they come here, they're like, they just put plants where the discharges were sort of already happening, so we'll talk about that more, but there are lots of reasons.
That was already one of my questions.
Yeah, like why are we doing this?
Yeah, that's great.
Is there anything else?
Yeah, so I mean, the first 3 items, the new aeration tanks, tertiary treatment, and secondary clarifier tanks, those are all new added capacity, and that before, and then I'll get into the other items, those are basically all.
Do you want to talk about dewatering, just because?
Yeah, new dewater, so even though that is kind of, I guess you could say, a replacement, our dewatering equipment is such a heavy operational expense. It's both from a maintenance and personnel expense, as well as like one of our biggest cost items for disposal. So that's a really big capital cost component for this project, as well as it should lead to future savings, because we'll be reducing the amount of sludge that goes out the door by more efficiently getting the water out of it. So we're not trucking as much water.
We're not trucking water plus sludge, we're trucking.
Right, biosolids, or sludge.
We spend about $1 million a year, and that number just keeps going up and up, and when you look at states on our borders, they've seen doubling of their biosolids costs, so it's really something that we need to try to cost contain, so.
Yeah, and at this point in time, it's looking like centrifuge technology that we have piloted a few years back now will be the preferred alternative, and a centrifuge is better than bell filter press. That's the one, I think, at least the main room that everyone bypasses during our tours. You haven't been in there. It will make, it makes your clothes smell.
You gag.
You gag,
gag.
It is what it is, but it's.
Wait, did we go in that room? Because I think I gagged.
No, I don't think we took you, I think we just take you to the window.
The light.
Took you near
Our previous safety manager used to, I think the one time we took her in there, she gagged for a while afterwards.
Yeah, so the belt filter presses, they do actually, they're very practical of the equipment that we have now, they work well. Except these specific ones are now very old and falling apart and need tons of maintenance. But they're open, so I don't have any pictures of them in there, unfortunately. A centrifuge is basically an enclosed technology though, so that'll help with worker safety as well as being more efficient. So yeah, just I guess here we can look at some images that are, these are as part of stage 1 equipment that just needs to be replaced. This is kind of the primary clarifiers, that upper left-hand corner, the kind of like the grit and screening that gets a lot of wear and tear because it's near the beginning of our wastewater treatment process. So those corroded components, everything you see there that's metal would be replaced during stage 1, and that's in all 6 existing clarifiers, plus we get a new one in the 5th clarifier that we're adding. The lower left, it's kind of hard to see, but that's a blown out like electrical control unit that is a commonplace, and we have a lot of electrical systems that need to be replaced, and that's also in stage 1. Aeration tankage is more of, we're putting in new tanks, so not necessarily a replacement in kind. It kind of is. It's, we're putting in aeration tanks, but they're going to be bigger. It's going to be a bigger sized tank with new equipment. You can see here that one of the gate slides in the upper left-hand corner is completely rotted out. There's a big structural crack in that tank right there, and
Which makes me nervous when I drive by.
yeah, those are the biggest ones. The lower left is also has it was a structural arm support that broke off of a mixer in the aeration tank. And then our influent pumps are how we get the wastewater through the treatment plant, and those need constant maintenance. And this one was in the shop today, so I took a photo. It has some holes kind of through the body of it, so just wanted to share that.
Sorry.
Sorry.
What did you have another?
Nope. So east, this is stage 2. This is now that stage 1 is done, we'd be able to accommodate the flows from the east plant. So this is the pump station conversion, as well as important north wastewater treatment facility improvements. This is also in the preliminary engineering phase from 2023 to 2024. Design would be a little bit after stage 1 with 2025 to 2026 as the target. Construction in 2026 to 2028 with the current cost estimate at $38 million. So we did talk a little bit about this, so I'll just go through the pieces that we haven't yet for the east plant conversion. As you know, east plant's on Riverside Ave in the upper right-hand corner of that map, and those arrows show the approximate route that new piping would be needed to get the flow all the way to main plant. So this was evaluated, and essentially the evaluation was comparing keep east plant and maintain it as it is versus pump it to main plant, and
We'll keep it as it is, but have to upgrade it because it's so dang old.
right, yep. And so with that, when you look at it over 50 years, there's a $30 million cost savings when capital and O&M are considered. So they're significant cost savings, which we will have to refine more as we move through engineering to confirm that these assumptions are correct. It also, so it gets rid of kind of a pretty bad operational challenge right now because there is so much old equipment at the east plant. So if we did keep it, we would have to do a major overhaul there, which is all considered in the evaluation. And we talked about the capacity increase, so that's I think an important one that we highlighted. And I think another one to kind of hit home as a really big positive is that the east plant flows would now get tertiary treatment, because that's, main plant is where the tertiary treatment's going, not the other plants. So we would then be capturing that and be able to give it phosphorus treatment.
Additional bonus.
Yep. So the stage 2 east plant conversion, it would be a pump station, kind of that middle square is where we're assuming the pump station would be, and then one of the capacity of one of those tanks, the primary clarifier tanks, is calculated to be enough for emergency storage for large rain events as part of the pump station design. We'd also be maintaining the admin building that's just to the left of that. And as Megan mentioned previously, the Headworks building on the right is still going to benefit this project because then we'll have treated, all the grit will be out of the sewage before it's pumped. So North Wastewater Treatment Facility, not, kind of gets overlooked because they, except for the siphon, I guess, but usually they're not, you know, a big problem, but they do have some significant improvements that are needed. Clarifier mechanisms, similar to main plant, all need to be replaced. And the intermediate pumps, so basically North Plant, their pumping system is not at the very beginning of their process, it's halfway through. And that is basically how the sewage gets through the end of their treatment process, and that needs a significant upgrade.
But North Plant, sort of, we're focusing all of our efforts, stage 1 on main plant, right? North Plant's gonna have to hang in there for stage 2, but that goes into some of our conversations or eventual conversations about when we try to go for what amount of money.
Yeah, and then there'll be improvements to the admin building too, which,
Yep, okay.
yeah, so stage 3, this is a project that we don't currently, that we don't currently have in the scope. It's not under engineering right now. We're proposing that potentially it'd start in 2026 to 2027 for preliminary engineering, with design for 27 through 28, with construction starting in 2028. This cost estimate is $82 million.
So it's not a preliminary engineering, but we have been it's part of the sort of longer range planning, right? Because we don't want to be only sharing part of the pizza with everybody. We want to see what the whole pizza looks like.
Yeah. So yeah, just stepping through the stage 3 items. This is you know, pretty important stuff. I think stage 1 was more of the upgrade. This is again back to a lot of replacing in kind and bringing up to modern standards. The wet weather influence screen is a much larger version of our dry screen, which right where Megan's pointing, right where the wastewater comes into the building. And we'll be doing HVAC everywhere. The CSO pumps, also like our influent pumps, they're critical for getting wastewater through, and they're even bigger than our influent pumps. And that's right next to, yeah, that's right where Megan's pointing right there. New sludge storage tanks are all the way to the right, also to be determined exactly where those will end up. We'd be doing the grit blower, replace primary sludge pumps and grinder pumps, so kind of we haven't touched a lot of the pumps and piping in the main control building, which is kind of that central one. There are a lot of old, I'll show some pictures, pipes and pumps in there, as well as the plant water systems on the list. And we will be repairing the chlorine contact tank and other site improvements. So similar to the stage 3 at the main plant, here at North Plant, we will be doing replacement of the return activated sludge and waste activated sludge pumps and piping and valves. This one's different. We have waited until stage 3 for aeration system and blowers, which aren't necessarily in great condition, but we do feel like they can go a little bit longer. That's a really critical component of treatment, so just wanted to point that out. And then converting the anaerobic digesters to sludge storage, that's where Megan's pointing now. Updating the control building, replacing electrical, and site updates. Just some quick photos of corrosion. So I think I don't need to talk about every item, but just corroded piping inside the main plant building. This is what we're waiting for stage 3, even though it's, needs to be done soon.
Basically, going all the way through stage 3 gets us to full plant renewal, set the stage, then we won't have to deal with it within our careers. Maybe someone else's within the next 20 years. It's, meeting the 2030 resiliency vision of trying to get that all done and making sure that Burlington has fully working, modernized plants by 2030. Of course, yeah, I was gonna say, Martin's leading the charge on the wastewater treatment facilities. There's plenty of other things that we're continuing to plan, all listed here, whether it's additional pump stations, collection system improvements. We've got stormwater outfalls that still need to be repaired and combined sewer overflow mitigation. And then on the drinking water side, the 1867 pump house, which is responsible for pumping water from the system, from the reservoir up to the tanks, which feeds the hospital, the region's only level 1 trauma center. It's very, very old, 1867, needs to be replaced, and so that's in preliminary, or it's actually completed preliminary design, preliminary engineering, right? And is about to go into final design. And so that's sort of on the ticket that needs to go forward sooner rather than later. I can't remember off the top of my head what the current cost estimate of that is, though.
I'd have to check.
Yeah. And then, as we've shared before, the water distribution system, the valves, the transmission mains, and then just all the regular piping continues to need us to chip away at it to prevent additional water main breaks. Is there anything else not on this list that we're doing?
Well, those are the big ones.
Well, there's also the drinking water plant, the treatment of the drinking water plant, that was last updated in 1984. Doesn't have as many of the issues because it's not as exposed to harsh environments like wastewater is, but needs to be looked at and is being looked at. And then I was just taking over because we're talking big numbers, really big numbers. To put it a little bit in perspective, especially when you talk about renewal, the cost of the last upgrade in the 1990s was $52 million. If you just convert that into today's dollars, this number may be a little old with recent inflation. That would put us at $100 million already. And then when you start talking about modernizing and improving and adding capacity, that's where you start to get to some of these other even larger dollars. We do believe everybody deserves access to clean drinking water and access to wastewater, and so we are very much committed to figuring out how to pursue all state, federal funding and low-cost financing for this work, how to strategically and phase the investments to kind of spread the cost impact over time, and to explore various rate setting and also enhanced affordability measures. We launched our affordability program in 2021, really, which is primarily targeting super low income people who already qualify for state and federal programs. We're gonna be taking a look at how we might be able to create affordability programs for folks who make more than those people, but are still gonna have a hard time potentially paying the rates that may have to be, set in order to pay down this kind of debt. I think that's it. Thanks, Martin. Awesome job. Good job with pictures. I've been asking for those pictures for a while. I'm like, I know stuff is breaking, let's start taking pictures of it.
Thank you. That was a lot of stuff. All right, Commissioner Hogan. So you're typing away there. What are all your questions?
Yeah, no, this is good stuff. A lot to sleep on here. One question, can you give me an example for some of the pictures of things that look, they're cracked and really disrepair, that are worrying? What sort of like risk score are we looking at for things like that? You know, you put your tally up there, of A through F, and looking at how that distribution has changed over time, but.
I think the biggest risk items, because it's like so there's the consequence and likelihood. So like, some of them are more likely than others, and if it goes down for a day, like the grit, they can get by. It's just gonna add a lot of maintenance and kind of a lot of labor to get through, and the treatment will still be fine at the end. But if something like the blower goes down, then there's been accidents where it's like the oxygen reader is off, and they're scrambling. It's like, how come our treatment's not working well? It's because of the aeration. That's such a critical component that if that goes down, the risk is much higher on that, like in the consequence of failure. So I think, you know, what Megan was showing, that one slide with the highest risk, I would think those numbers are from blowers and dewatering. Probably those are high cost and high consequence of failure, versus, even though our primary treatment, you know, primary clarifier, screening, and grit are very important to everything downstream of it, they can go down for kind of a period of time and not really have an effect on the final effluent.
And I think on the staging and the phasing, you know, I think the charge or the goal was trying to take care of the highest risk things as early as possible, but because of the slide puzzle and what has to be done before other things can be done, it's a little bit of a combination. So there might be some things where, all other things being equal, you might want to do that higher risk thing sooner, but because of other things that we're trying to manage, we have to put it until a little bit later, which is certainly uncomfortable. But even then it gets into, okay, when we're looking at main plant versus north plant, if there's a failure at north plant, we're talking a much smaller volume into the river than at main plant, which if it happens during a storm event can be very, very large volumes. And so we're having to make those very challenging decisions. I mean, we would love it, and certainly we can discuss if the voters just want to give us money to do it all at the same time, but even then, it can't be all done at the same time, because these are very large facilities and they can't go offline. You can't just say, nobody flushed their toilet for the next 3 months while we build this thing. It's build this, move this. I mean, I haven't been through a comprehensive upgrade, and it's daunting, I won't lie, how we're gonna keep things running as we're also building new things.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's good perspective. When we see the run-of-the-mill cracked wall or something, that's like of concern, but it's not at the top of the list here. All right, yeah, nothing else here, thanks.
Okay. Commissioner Barr.
I was gonna say portalets for everyone. We can do it all.
Yeah.
This was a lot, and I did try and read through, but thank you for the presentation, because it made a lot more sense of what I was trying to read. I'm just curious, because I live in the east end of Burlington, the pump station. Will that free up land for other things? I'm not sure.
Airbnbs.
No, yeah, it won't smell because it's a pump station, right? No, I was just curious what that was going to do, because I know there's some erosion along the river bank there.
Yeah, we would, I don't know exactly our plan for decommissioning this, because most of their investment's going to be higher up on the.
Towards the road.
Right, like I don't see any like frontage basically going away, because the road kind of wraps around. It's like,
right.
I mean, the bottom part where there is already a recreational path, like that kind of like lower section could gain a little space.
But at least we won't have infrastructure that's that much closer to the river,
Right.
should the river decide to gobble more earth.
Okay. And that was really one of the focuses that I was looking at, being from that area and how we're trying to improve the neighborhoods and connections with the rest of the city, just seeing what
Yep,
we can do there.
definitely keep that in mind.
So.
Wastewater, we have waterworks park, we can have wastewater park.
We could. There's a
Sell
number-
tickets, yeah.
There are a number of municipal needs that we're trying to slide around like a logic puzzle, and clearly if there's an open space here,
That's true,
it's
actually.
likely that we will be able to explore meeting some of our other needs in that space, TBD.
Right, we actually use Winooski's drying beds for some of our grit stuff, and so we could potentially then meet our need there. I don't even know if we've talked about that. Every time you talk to me, I'm doing it, sorry.
Well, I wasn't going like this, like, ooh, some land that we could do. I guess I was more focused on previous meetings where city engineer Baldwin has told us that there's a lot of erosion along the
Yes.
banks.
Yes.
And what kind of things can we do to try and shore it up a little bit? But that was really it. Thanks. Great presentation.
Commissioner Fox?
Yeah, I just had one question. So, when you say all of the wastewater from the east plant is just gonna be converted to the main plant, can you just speak to sort of what that means? Like, I understand main plant's gonna be built up, so it's gonna then have capacity for it, but how is that wastewater, like, physically moving from
Yeah.
one plant to a completely different plant?
We need to go back to this slide.
Lots of buckets. Yeah, it would be a significantly sized pump station, and the design parameters would be similar to actually many of our other pump stations we have in the collection system. It would just be the biggest one. You know, the same, it needs storage based on, you know, if power goes out or if we get torrential rain. So that's what one of those tanks, the clarifiers would be there to help retain the storm flows. And then it would all pump along those kind of red arrows as the approximate path. So it would be a significant right-of-way construction project, getting a new pipe all the way from East Plant to the main plant.
And some of the questions are, you know, in earlier iterations, we were trying to just build a force main from Riverside's location, sort of near Bluebird Barbecue,
Mm-hmm.
and get it pumped up to the gravity system where it could then go via gravity. I think we're also evaluating whether or not it may be better to just have its own dedicated force main for a lot of the path, or more of the path than I think we maybe originally.
Yeah, well, I think it's the bottleneck, I mean, because we have our main plant's a CSO facility, so as you get there, that's where all the storm flow's going. So if we're adding East Plant flow, it adds a lot of complexity and issues, basically,
Yeah.
frankly. So if we have a pipe that goes all the way there, we get around that. We're not gonna impact the capacity of the piping that's already has issues in that area. And one potential benefit would be, if we added it to the collection system, it would go through the screening. So if you remember, we've already screened it before it gets pumped. So if we can pump it directly to main plant, we can then put it in after the screening equipment. So it adds, kind of frees up the capacity there, which,
We're not rescreening, you know.
yeah, saves some
So
energy.
we're looking at all of that. Because otherwise, we would have to pump it to the gravity system and then somehow, you know, increase the size of the collection system, the gravity system. But I think what Martin's saying is, as we've continued on our evaluations and our modeling, even though that works for the upper parts, for like the middle part, as we get further and further down Battery Street, there are some historical issues with how things are configured that we may not be able to work around. And so that's the most recent fun challenge that has been thrown as we continue the ball of design.
Okay. Thanks. That's the only question that I had.
Thank you. Vice Chair Damiani?
I think the only question I had was around, you know, how can we as a commission help support moving this forward to voters to, you know, it's clearly very important stuff that I don't think many members of the public are fully aware of, and how can we sort of bring broader attention to these particular issues that clearly are time sensitive.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. Part of the reason why we came here in advance of a potential November vote is that there's significant time for you all to get comfortable with this, to talk to counselors, to talk to neighbors. Likely we'll be going to NPAs, we will be going to neighborhood planning assemblies. Having commissioners join us and present with staff can be a great way of getting you involved and to show the public that this isn't just a staff-driven event, but or effort. So there are a multitude of ways. I know in past capital requests to voters, you all have weighed in as to whether or not you support a particular ballot item, and that has been helpful as well. Given the size and magnitude of this effort, we've been very appreciative of the voters' strong past support of water and wastewater bonds, but given the size, given the high school, given all the other dynamics going on, we're gonna need to lift this together.
Yeah, and I've been sort of waiting for the dust to settle a little bit on the final cost estimates before I start running into the different rate setting strategies and like really what is this going to look at. And part of that is also trying to take a bigger look at what the region's wastewater and water rates are looking at, right? To kind of apples to apples, that we're not alone, and that if we need X number of dollars and rates of a certain size, that is something that's typical, because people are very quick usually to say, you know, everybody's gonna move out of Burlington, costs are too high, but if we can sort of legitimize that these are real costs that other communities are experiencing, even if Vermont towns aren't, right? Communities of this size with combined sewer systems and so on and so forth, that this is reasonable. And so trying to package that all up so that we have a full story, because I certainly don't wanna go out and just share these numbers without saying, okay, what is your rate actually going to look like? And how are we gonna help you mitigate that through affordability programs and whatnot?
Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you sort of talking earlier about when you were looking at the affordability program, sort of expanding beyond even just, I think, lower income folks, because I think.
Trying, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard because the administrative, like right now we're leveraging other programs that have already income qualified people, and so how do we look at other types of income
Yeah.
qualification and who would do that? Is that an administrative burden that we want to pay for? Is there a larger city effort? I think there's a lot of opportunity for conversation about how we as a city can do that without it necessarily being water having to do it on their own. BED has an affordability program. We've been talking with them about, you know, potential joint effort. Could we join forces to figure out how to turn up the dial on what we can offer to ratepayers? Because I think there are plenty of people in Burlington who can't afford the potential rates that may come from this investment. But there's a lot of people where it's gonna hurt, and I don't want them to have to choose between, you know, how frequently they're bathing their kids, although kids would probably appreciate that. My kids at least would have, we don't need to bathe, we're gonna only bathe twice a week. Save water.
Wait until they're teenagers.
I've heard that, we've gotten notes from customers about that.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all of this. I mean, this may be like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, but, you know, what are the behavioral changes that customers, ratepayers, can enact to help mitigate some of the, you know, you mentioned like bricks going, like, who flushes it? People flush a brick down the toilet? I don't
That's
know.
often from like
Okay.
the storm parts of our system.
Okay,
yes.
but I know there are lots of other things that, when we went through, you know, those flushable wipes go down and so forth. We need all this, and not flushing a wipe is not going to impact this. But there are behavioral changes that we as citizenry can make. You know, so I wonder, in part of the messaging, you know, that it's a whole package that we think about, you know, what you put on your lawn, your rain gardens, you know, we're not just bystanders in this, we are participants in this ecosystem.
Yes, it is your infrastructure, not just my
Right,
infrastructure.
right, exactly. So those pieces as well in the education and outreach, you know, kind of as we all move forward. I don't know what those pieces are or what they could look like or what the impact could possibly be. But certainly, like, thinking about, like, you know, how do we all get
All
this
in,
together?
yeah.
Right.
No, absolutely.
And then I guess thinking, you know, you talked about the workforce piece, where it seems like you need to hire MacGyver.
Yep.
Right. So what are, you know, how is your department addressing workforce and upskilling, or making sure that you have, you know, not just the talent and skill, but it seems like in the short term, a lot of creativity to be able to problem solve in, you know, just some of those slides.
Yeah, the workforce one is really challenging. I'm on as much as I can be, a task force regionally to look at workforce issues, because it's not just Vermont, just the number of kids that are coming out of tech school programs. You know, a lot of the people who are our best mechanics were self-taught, grew up on farms, tinkered on their cars, and that's not what our society looks like. So there is a bigger conversation. I do fear that we're a little behind the curve, like this conversation about skilled trades needed to have happened 5-10 years ago, so we would be reaping the benefit. Actively engage with our HR, one of our HR people about the possibility of apprenticeships and whatnot, so we can literally grow from within. Have been working with the union and Chapin on trying to come up with different salary structures, like a tiered salary program where we'd be able to hire somebody at a lower pay grade as an operator in training, right? And then train them, and then as soon as they get their certification, boom, 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 they can automatically move up instead of having to wait for somebody. We do have one operator in training position at main plant right now, but it's static in that you could get stuck there if an operator position doesn't open up. So I'm sure Chapin will tell you I have no shortage of ideas, and usually energy. Trying to find time to do all of that while we're also trying to manage this is a real challenge. So it really is a statewide thing as well, but deeply on my mind.
Okay, thank you.
So.
That's all for me.
She is correct. She's full of ideas.
And energy.
Yes.
Even when she's sick,
I
that's
know.
scary.
Well, thank you so
Thank
much for this set of presentations.
Yeah, it was a lot. It's like a 3-course meal, I guess, not just.
If there's nothing else, so we had to fill the space, right?
Yes, exactly. There's nothing else that you could do.
It was wonderful that there was actually open space
Yeah,
on
it
this
was-
agenda to hit this, because it's deserving of more than a 10-minute overview. So thank you for allotting the time.
And
Yeah.
I would love to come back and maybe schedule some time to talk about the reservoir project, the pump house project I mentioned in the reservoir improvement. Is
The 1867 pipe, is that the?
the pump house, yeah, so
Pump
it's
house.
the little house when you're driving up Main Street, right? There's the little cute little historical
Pretty.
building. Huh?
It's pretty.
It's pretty, and it's old, and the floor inside is very, very, very old, and the pumps in there are very, very, very heavy, and,
Is that the one across from Morrill Hall?
Yeah.
yes. And then behind it is 7 million gallons of water storage. That is a critical part of our system. It's what enables, we pump water up there, and it enables to kind of manage the various water use levels of the day, so that we're not just having to pump constantly, and then water's pumped from there up to the elevated tanks, which is what provides the pressure, the water pressure to reach, the top floors of the hospital. So it is, aside from our drinking water plants, is the other single most important piece of drinking water infrastructure.
I walk by that every day on my way to work. I just have a total of different appreciation for it now. Thank you.
Yeah.
But you'll have to wait till next time for that full story.
Nail biter. Thank you very much. All right.
Thanks.
All right, so that closes the wastewater updates. Whew, that was a good one. Next up, director's report.
All right, make it short. I think, Chair O'Neill Levanco, you're gonna cover the council presentation for the commission. So I will skip that and say that,
Tag, you're it.
we are going to be updating the South End Construction Coordination Plan. You all know that we've tried to sequence work with Champlain Parkway, the roundabout, the Rail Yard Enterprise Project, Main Street, Great Streets. Yes, thank you. And as we've been evaluating where we are a year into that plan, there are changes and updates. On the positive side of things, that the Champlain Parkway is moving ahead of schedule. Now that it's under construction, which it had been behind schedule for its whole life, so this is a new thing that we're all trying to get adjusted to. But we're looking to reevaluate where we are with this plan. We'll be bringing that to you either next month or the month after, and what that means for phasing other projects. Since we put that plan together, there have been additional projects added to the list, mainly Great Streets projects around City Place, Burlington, and having received major grants for Bank Street and Cherry Street. So we look forward to bringing that to you next month. And I will say we are, as you saw in my director's report, working steadfastly to get ready for winter. We will have winter here soon, though the weather is looking good the next couple of days. Our plow trucks and our sidewalk tractors are in the equipment maintenance shop right now, getting ready for winter, and we will be prepared. So happy to answer any questions.
Great. Commissioner Barr, any questions, comments?
None so far. I was just gonna give another kudos to the team here working with my neighborhood on traffic calming and implementing things. After our last meeting, that daytime, we had a meeting here with some of the folks from your team, and it was like a day later things were implemented. So it was phenomenal. Everybody that had come to the meeting and everybody who had joined in on our previous meeting to coming here said, oh my God, they're out there painting. There's all sorts of stuff going on. This is so fantastic. So
Good.
DPW
I will pass that on.
wins
Thank
again.
you.
Yep.
Commissioner Fox?
Thanks. I guess in reading your report, I had one question that just popped up. So in the Great Streets, Main Street, you say that bids came in higher than expected. It seems like this is happening very frequently with projects that we're like ready to build, but then all the bids come in and they're so high that we can't. And so I know this is an existential question, but how are we sort of dealing with that? Right? Like, I don't know. Sorry.
No, this is a huge question that folks all across the country are grappling with. For this particular project, it means that this crew here has been meeting with me and the technical services team to explore revenue enhancing opportunities. Are there other sources of funding we can bring to the project, while also exploring value engineering? Are there things we can cut out of the project? In addition, can we phase the project so that we do things in parts instead of a whole? We are trying to get better at our engineers' estimates. Some of our projects, Main Street, Great Streets is a good example where the unit quantities that were being used by our consultant weren't being updated enough to the point where the engineer's estimate was far from the low bid. And,
Wow.
you know, that situation puts an added pressure on staff once the bids come in, because there's only a short window in which you can accept the bid, or else you have to go out to bid. So we are now in the period now of changing our schedules, rushing, having meetings, and trying to get the budget to balance.
Okay.
So we hope to have a recommendation that would be brought forward on Main Street, Great Streets to the City Council in November.
Not easy.
Oh, thanks to the team for working through that.
Okay. That's the only question I had.
Commissioner Hogan?
There, very pleasantly surprised to see a flashing pedestrian light, RFB, I guess, on St. Paul at Union. Popped up in the past month. It was great. Crossing South Union is still a mess in terms of sight line when you're crossing from west to east. that was something where early in my commission tenure, we might have pushed the sign back like 4 feet or something. It was negligible. Improvement there, but at least getting across St. Paul is much, much improved with that. It's not like a engineering change to slow anyone down, but the blinky lights help, especially.
Visibility.
Yeah, for sure.
With the curve, yeah.
Real quick on bike shares, I got a chance to ride 3 different bike share systems since we met last. Of course, sort of shocked that our home system here is really maybe 3 times the price of per minute of the systems that I encountered in Montreal and DC in the past few weeks, and it's a lot. Pushing 50 cents a minute, that hurts. Makes perfect sense. We see college kids doing unsafe things like doubling up on these bikes and stuff. So I know, really, beggars can't be choosers. It was not a slam dunk to have bike share at all. But just wanted to toss that out there that it's not. To me, at those prices, it's not like a regular run-of-the-mill thing. Like, oh darn, I'm running late. Like I could hop on one, but I regret it.
Well, yes, we are planning to bring to the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee an update on the bike share for this last season. To them, if you would like to see that update, happy to bring it here. We're planning to do that in November after the warm season generally concludes. And we were coordinating that today. We have seen significant increase in use with the arrival of the students in September to a level that, frankly, we hadn't seen in the past systems because they really were fixed, docked systems. And, this more flexible system is at least getting the bikes out to where people need them. To your point, yes, this small system and the vendor needed a price point to make their costs, given the small market that's higher than the bigger cities that you've experienced. But that is something we can evaluate. It's an annual contract with the vendor. Well, I should say there's annual renewals. The contract continues. But if the feedback from you and others is very clear that there needs to be changes, then staff can work on those changes before the next year.
I know we don't necessarily have sponsors bankrolling it or
Yeah.
anything. I mean, to be fair, that vendor's prices in DC are not much cheaper than they are here, for what it's worth.
Well, I think it's worth adding, right? Like the city didn't pay a cent for this new system, right? No one did. So they're just a private company with permission to operate. And so that's something to consider when we look at the prices. From my perspective, it just seems like it's really what the cost of doing business is, especially in a city this size. So
we could have a policy discussion on whether we want to subsidize the service.
Sure.
Yeah.
Other note on, I think I mentioned last time, gotten plugged in, thanks to Chair Vivanco, with some planning meetings with representatives of our Public Works Engineering staff, the school district, infrastructure crew, and so forth. Has been generally, like, I think, pleasant and productive engagements. A couple meetings that I've been involved with. I brought one issue forward just from my regular day-to-day travels. There was something done, I think, to address it. It was not helping, and in fact, it made life worse for the people that they should be helping.
Okay.
So I'll follow up with them, but it was a little concerning that it's really so disconnected from changes that might help people that are outside of vehicles.
Okay.
From
I'm happy to
some
follow
people
up.
at some level at the school district.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll follow up with that and our engineering folks offline.
Thanks for carrying the torch.
Yep. So curious about, I think this last thing quick, our traffic counts. We've got 2 counties out, at least within the last week, on Locust and North Winooski that I've seen. Does that data get fed, and the name on it's like, contact Julia if we have questions. Does that get fed into the V-Trans or the Regional Planning Commission's database of counts? Or is that sort of our own thing that we hoard the numbers
I
on.
believe it does get passed on to CCRPC, but I can confirm.
Okay,
Yes, yeah, I'm not sure. I will check.
okay. That's all here, thank you.
All right. Vice Chair, any?
I just wanted to highlight, I got an email today, there was an email that went out from DPW around the surveying folks that utilize the North Winooski Ave corridor, so I just wanted to highlight that that survey went out and make sure that folks fill that out so we can measure the impacts of the parking changes along North Winooski Ave. I've heard from a few folks since our last meeting about sidewalk infrastructure and sort of their condition, and I know at a previous meeting, I can't remember when, we talked about, as a commission, sort of getting a better understanding around how the department prioritizes sidewalk replacement. So I'd like to see that in a future meeting. And then in light of today's long agenda item with the, all of the water and wastewater stuff, I think, it was really great to sort of see it full circle from our field trip that we took, I think, in our October meeting last year. So I just want to encourage us doing more of that as a commission as we talk about additional agenda items and having us have sort of that pre-meeting field trip beforehand more often.
Go for field trips.
Go for field trips.
Take my coffee and leave outside.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I'll-
Feel better.
I'll be at it for a while, but.
A comment on sidewalks, also. Getting a sense of what repair looks like. Certainly, the sidewalks on Overlake Park in front of my house are terrible. And I tripped last night with my husband, and.
Oh, the irony.
You know what he said? He's like, I'm gonna tell the commission that you cracked your skull on the stupid sidewalk. But, some of that's operator error. But no, there are just chunked sidewalks. I walk a lot, and I think, we focus on like what's in front of our house, what impacts us a lot. But again, as we start to head towards winter, it's just gonna get icy and dicey. So I think knowing that there's a plan across the city for, either the patch repairs instead of like the entire block, just kind of helpful communication.
Okay.
Really quickly on the bike share piece, the great thing about dockless systems is that those bikes do go where users live and work and use them. The cost, though, it'd be interesting to see the back-end data to see where they wind up, if it's just beyond students, and if we're really dealing with an equity issue of it's too expensive, the idea that they can move into some of the neighborhoods where folks are transit dependent or zero vehicle households or one vehicle moving with the wage earner. It would be great to see what the rollout could be or what the price point would be and how that's subsidized. And then finally, how are we doing with staffing in the department as the snow begins to think about flying and thinking about streets, maintenance, plowing, any gaps?
I'm pleased to report that the street maintenance team is nearly fully staffed, which is great. We have had some internal shifts from some work groups to others. So there are some work groups that are down. Our water distribution team is significantly understaffed right now, and they also help with plowing in the winter. So we are working with the union on some ideas collectively that we can not only support the staff who are keeping the lights on and working hard to kind of keep things going, but also look at ways to recruit additional staff. So I would say generally overall, our gaps right now are in water distribution, transportation planning, where we have 2 vacancies, and then I think a myriad of 1s and 2s across the organization. But those are the main 2 areas we're struggling with.
Okay. Great, thanks. One final note is 3 of the tech staff from Public Works are attending EV safety training workshop, which is really exciting, thinking about the path towards electrification that the city is on, and that they're excited for the training. So,
Great.
yeah, great support from above, I guess. So that's all I have. It looked like our questions to the director kind of led into commissioner communications, but I just want to double check. Anyone have any other questions?
Oh, well, I'll add one thing. Next Sunday, Burlington Parks Rec and Waterfront is hosting the annual Halloween bike ride through town. We invite all members of staff to attend
In costume?
in costume.
Nice.
And
Not dressed as Public Works people.
And new this year, there is a walking component for folks who don't bike or don't want to bike. So, yeah, you're
Lovely.
hereby invited.
What's the date? Is it usually this Sunday?
It's
Oh,
week from
next-
Sunday.
next-
the
next Sunday.
The 29th?
29th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have that right,
23rd.
right? Next Sunday, not
Yeah.
this Sunday,
No,
next
we've
Sunday.
got a week and a half.
The 29th,
Week and a half,
October
yeah.
29th.
You have plenty of time to get your costumes ready. And their prizes.
He's gonna win.
All right, well, any other comments? Nope. That closes that section. Motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. Can we take a vote on that, please? All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any discussion? Nope. Meeting adjourned. We'll see you all next.